Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla and I like to talk about books, but today I'm actually going to be talking about movies.
Getting depressed and all that happens to me every year.
Specifically, I want to talk about the Harry Potter movies because I just watched the Return to Hogwarts 20th anniversary special. I think that's what it's called, something like that. And it kind of just got me thinking about all of the original movies because it kind of looked back at all of the different films, and it got me thinking about like my personal thoughts on the films, ranking the films. I've done this with the Harry Potter books before, so I thought it would be kind of fun to do it with the films, which are obviously kind of a different thing. So my ranking is pretty different, I feel like. I just thought this would be fun to do, so let's just get right into it, and I'm going to go from my least favorite to my favorite. And right off the bat, my least favorite movie is the sixth movie, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually think all of these movies are still really good, but in my opinion, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince kind of drags a little bit. It ends up being very slow during the whole middle section, which is unfortunate because I actually love the ending, and I think that the ending is really well done. I think that for Draco Malfoy, this is like really one of the times where his character is most interesting. I think that Tom Felton, the actor who plays him, does an amazing job at the end of this movie. I just want to say right off the bat, spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about the movies very freely. I am going to be spoiling, so if you've not watched them or you want things to remain a surprise, like, don't watch this video because I will be spoiling lots of ending stuff. So back to my thoughts on the movie. I think that the part with Draco Malfoy and Dumbledore and the end where Dumbledore dies is really, really good and interesting. I do love the part when Harry and Dumbledore are in the cave. I think stylistically, aesthetically, it fits the mood of the sixth book, which is a very dark tone. It's a very kind of moody, somber type of book, but it just drags a lot with all of the kind of relationship stuff in the middle. This movie just kind of drags in the middle for me. There's a bit of a timing issue. So I think that that's why it's probably my least favorite to watch. But in some ways, I also really love watching it because, like I said, those end performances with Michael Gambon and with Tom Felton, so Draco Malfoy and Dumbledore, have really great performances. Honestly, Harry as well, like Daniel Radcliffe really gets to do some acting in this film, I guess in all of them, but it drags so much in the middle. So I think that's why this is my least favorite Harry Potter film. The next Harry Potter film on this list, I feel like people might be upset about this one. This is actually one of my favorite of the books, so this may be why I judge it a little bit more harshly, but the fourth Harry Potter movie, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. There's a specific reason that it's on this list.
Harry, did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire?
That's it. That's the reason that it's so low on the list. We can just talk about it all day long, but that was a real misfire. I mean, otherwise, I think that this movie has some real high points. I think that it's a very energetic film, and I like that. That's fun to watch. There's a lot of spectacle in this movie. The things that I like about the book are present in the movie, and I think that they do a good job of capturing a lot of that. However, there are definitely some elements that just are lacking a little bit that you kind of miss from the books. I really miss Hermione's Society for the Protection of Elfish Welfare. I really miss Winky in the movie. And I know that, like, timing wise, they probably really just didn't have time to cover those things, but I do find that those were like really essential parts of the book. And they were also really essential parts of like Hermione as a character. I feel like it just sets up that she is very much for justice and equality within this world, and that there are just some real inherent biases that exist within this world, and it addresses them a lot more in that book. And I loved that theme, and I really loved that storyline. So it's really a bummer that that didn't make it into the movie. I fully understand why, but it doesn't mean that it's still not kind of a bummer. I miss a couple of those elements that were present in the book. For that and the whole "you should put your name into the Goblet of Fire," I'm gonna have to put this as my second least favorite. Next on this list is going to be Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, which is, I mean, a good movie. I think that it definitely captures the book really well. Again, it's got that really like warm kind of atmosphere that is conveyed in the second book, Returning to Hogwarts. I think in the second book and movie, when you're kind of through Harry's lens returning to Hogwarts and it feels like you finally found your home and you're finally returning to that place after like a terrible summer with the Dursleys, I really think that it captures that really well. A little bit like Half-Blood Prince, this movie has some kind of dragging and some timing issues. I think that it goes on a little bit too long. Sort of unlike the fourth movie, I think that actually they could have probably cut more from this. I'm not necessarily saying to cut out all of these things from the book, but just from a movie making perspective, I think that there could have been probably still quite a bit cut out of this film. But again, it really captures that tone of returning to Hogwarts. Harry feels like he's got his kind of home to return to. I mean, and it does a good job of being very accurate with the source material. It just isn't really one of my favorites. Still, as I said, I like all of the movies, so even my least favorites are movies I want to watch over and over and over again. I think the next one on my list is actually going to be Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I kind of go back and forth between whether or not it's this one or Sorcerer's Stone, but I think that for the next one it is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Now, I actually think that they did a really good job wrapping it up. Part 2 actually moves really quickly, so I do like that about it, and it gets like right into the action. I like the pacing of this. It's actually almost like a little bit too fast, I would argue. It's like very fast paced, but ooh, I don't know. I'm gonna actually just say that this is like tied with Sorcerer's Stone. I don't want to like rank them one above the other because I feel like in my mind they're tied. So actually, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 is tied with Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is a great movie. Again, it's kind of like, you know, the beginning and the end of the series, and I think those are such difficult movies to kind of nail because obviously the beginning was adapting a really beloved book. So the pressure, I mean, and I really realized it after watching that 20th anniversary special. He talked about it, Christopher Columbus. He was like, oh yeah, the pressure to adapt that was immense, and I can only imagine. But I actually think he did a really good job capturing the spirit of the book. I think that he used a lot of like the warm tones. He really made Hogwarts feel so welcoming yet still mysterious. He just absolutely captured the essence of the book so well and was pretty faithful to the story. And so for that, I think that these were both good attempts. Like, this was a good introduction into the series, and this was a good exit from the series, in my opinion. But they're both kind of tied, and they're in the middle for me as far as my ranking, because as good as they are at doing what they need to do, they're just not my favorites. So from here on up, it's like really just my favorite movies of the Harry Potter series. And they could be in almost any order, to be totally honest. So I'm gonna try and rank them, but it doesn't matter that much. So the next one on my list is going to be Harry Potter 5, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And this was such an interesting book for me. I had definitely a journey with this book of like loving it, not loving it so much, and like everything in between. But the movie, I have to say, I have never once questioned. I've always thought it was an excellent adaptation. It's the longest book, I believe. It's either that or Goblet of Fire. They're about the same maybe. I think this one's a little bit longer. And it ends up being, I believe, the shortest movie, which you might think that that means they cut a lot out. And obviously they did cut some things out, but I feel like it was actually adapted really well, and it kept the pace going so well. And the book itself sometimes could drag a little bit. So the movie fully addressed that, was like, we're not gonna deal with that. So it's kind of interesting to watch the fifth movie and then watch the sixth movie as the follow-up to that, because the pacing is so massively different in the two of those. The tone and everything is actually really similar, but the pacing is so different. Half-Blood Prince is so slow, and Order of the Phoenix is so so fast-paced, I think. And I love the adaptation with Dumbledore's Army. I feel like they got right to that. They showed it really effectively, conveyed it on the screen really, really effectively. And again, I think that there were just great performances from these really young actors. I mean, could you pick it apart? Sure, but I think that they did like a really good job of conveying like the heaviness of everything that followed the end of the fourth movie and Cedric Diggory's death and the return of Voldemort, and the heaviness of all of this government and political, oh gosh, it feels a bit like it does now, doesn't it? All of this disinformation that's being peddled by the ministry and the inside. It's just really interesting. They convey that so well, the heaviness of that, but it never feels too heavy and you never feel too depressed. There's such a hopeful undertone with Harry and these young hopeful kids and Dumbledore's Army and the Order of the Phoenix. I think the fifth one is just a really all-around good movie. It's well done. The pacing is great. The ending, the climax is just phenomenally done, and as I said, they convey a lot of things that were drawn out in the book on the screen in relatively short amount of time. So we're up to the top two now. My number 2 favorite Harry Potter movie from all of the films is Harry Potter 3 Prisoner of Azkaban, and this was actually my number 1 for a long time before like the last few came out, and I still honestly really love it. Directed by Alfonso Cuarón, it is so beautiful and definitely conveys like the darker tone of the third book without being too dark. It still has a very childlike quality. It really captures that bridge from childhood into kind of the teenage years. It's just beautiful. It's really beautifully shot. There are a lot more blue and gray tones and darker hues, still some of the warmth, but definitely a lot of darker hues. And I think that there's also a lot of like just really great performances. Obviously Gary Oldman as Sirius Black is like chef's kiss, best person they could have gotten. I honestly can't imagine anybody else playing that role, to be honest, because he just nailed it so well. They managed to get exactly the amount of material that needed to be on screen, and there were really some beautiful shots like of the Forbidden Forest and even the scenes with like Lupin transforming. I remember thinking that could have been so corny, like so many werewolf transforming scenes end up so corny, but the way that he did it was just so tasteful. Like, I just love what Alfonso Cuarón did with this movie, and I think that the kids definitely all started to like really take maybe their acting roles more seriously. I don't know what it was, but I really, really like this film. Obviously, by now you've probably deduced that my number 1 favorite Harry Potter movie is actually Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. And I'll preface this by saying that I think that this may be an unpopular opinion because this is still a little bit slower, especially compared to Part 2, which has obviously majority of that story's action. It has majority of Book 7's action. Though I will say Book 7 is pretty action-packed, like front to back. So I still think that Part 1 has a lot going for it. And I think that the way they split it up was really good. To have that Dobby death scene at the end, because you have that kind of climax with the Snatchers and at, I think it's Malfoy Manor, I don't remember. Yeah, to have that like real climax scene and with Bellatrix and Hermione, and it's so emotional and it's so charged, and then to have Dobby's death be the end of that film. It's not quite a resolution, but they do get to Shell Cottage, so there's that little bit of safety. So they really did manage to split it up in a way that like still had a proper story within Part 1, which, to be honest, I remember hearing they were splitting it up and being kind of worried that like that wouldn't work, they wouldn't know where to end it. Beautiful spot to end it because, like I said, it still has that sort of climax and that little bit of resolution that comes from them reaching Shell Cottage and reaching some little bit of safety. And it's such a sad ending with Dobby's death. I mean, if you don't cry when that happens, you might not have a heart. To be totally honest, you might not have a heart if you don't cry when Dobby dies. It is the saddest thing in the world. I know he's just like a puppet, but it's sad, okay? Sorry, I'm just gonna wax poetic and go on and on about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 because something I love with this film is just the style of it, sort of. Like, I mean, this is when they're really on the run. They're in random places all around like the UK. It's so beautiful, the locations that they're filming in, and I just love the style. I mean, and after Ron leaves, it's really such a somber tone, and even Hermione almost feeling kind of defeated, and when she's like, let's just curl up here and grow old. Like, I just think that they actually did a great job. I think the performances were honestly really good, and I even love that they added, and they actually talked about this in the special too, which I was so happy that they talked about, because they added that dance scene with the Nick Cave song. And I remember when I watched that, I was like, this wasn't in the book, but it adds a feeling of what was in the book. It adds a feeling of Ron leaves and Harry and Hermione are by themselves being support for each other. They have to be extra emotional support for each other during this hard time. And I love how it conveys that it just grows their friendship bond, and they're learning to lean on one another, but of course they're sad. It's just a really, really actually beautifully shot film. And again, the locations, I mean, all of it, I just love like the tone of it. I know it's so dark and like kind of sad, but I love the tone of it. And I actually think Emma Watson also got a chance to kind of like act it up in this movie, you know? So both she and Rupert Grint had kind of opportunities to really shine in this. I think that was nice too, from just like the perspective of like the three main characters, the three main actors. Like, that was just a really, really nice way to do that. I don't know, that's just my favorite one. I feel like it might be an unpopular opinion. I'm not sure. Let me know below what your favorite Harry Potter films are, what your order is. This is not an important topic at all, but I thought it would be fun to talk about. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe if you want to, and I will see you later.
Depressed and all that happens to me every year.